So the main idea of this video is that there are multiple pathways to purpose. And this came up in a conversation I was having with a fellow coach who was saying that we feel like people that are kind of in their early 20s or maybe throughout their 20s, even into their mid 30s, are struggling with meaning and purpose right now. And I said, I think a big issue there or challenge that we run into is that we have these kind of blind spots. So we get our sights set on something like really specific, like I have to do this. And when I was in college, I rolled with the management consultants and the investment banker crowd. So it was very much like, oh, I'm going to get to Goldman and then I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And it's not that there's anything wrong with those things, but it's just easy to get so caught up in that we don't see all these other options to achieve the type of life that we want to achieve. So let me give you an example. I'm going to show you this chart that I used in the course that I created and taught at the University of Alabama. This was from my lecture titled, What Should I Do With My Life? And you can see here that I often start with saying, like, do you have like a passion or an absolutely burning calling that you're obsessed with? And if you do, that's awesome. Now, is it economically viable? Can you actually have a career doing it? Like, right, if your thing is like, you really just are super passionate about stained glass making, like, I'm not trying to discourage you, but it might be hard to have a career doing that. So then it becomes, maximize free time in order to do the things I want to do. Or maybe you're like me and you didn't really have necessarily this thing that you like are obsessed with and you want to dedicate your life to. Then it's like, well, I don't know. I just like to, spend time with my friends and work out and go outside and travel and maybe read a little bit. It's like, okay, that's fine. Then try to design your life to maximize your free time in order to do more of the things you want to do. So coming back to me, you can see in that chart that it's just showing you that there are multiple paths, again, to get to the type of life you want. An example of how you can apply that, I was talking to someone who's kind of an informal mentor to me, who's the CEO of mindful.org. So he founded one of the biggest mindfulness and meditation focused media companies. And I was talking to him because I was like, it seems like you really did a good job of like bringing your passion and purpose into like having a very successful career. And he said, sure, but let me give you two examples. He said something like he knew some guy who wanted to be a screenwriter and like movie musician. I don't know what that's called, but that they do the music for the movie. And he dedicated his life to that. He went to school for it. He spent years in industry. He grinded and finally got his break. And he ended up being, after like 15 years, very successful score writer. I don't forget what it's called. But he had another friend who wanted to be a poet. And this poet went to law school. Not typically what you'd think for a poet. But he did that so that he could become a lawyer, start his own law practice, make a ton of money. But then he was like, he only had to work like 20 or 25 hours a week so he could spend those other 15 hours writing poetry. So you see here, like, there's multiple ways there, right? And that's the idea here, is that there are many right answers. So in this video, I'm going to try to explain that. So I'll offer a little bit of the scientific literature and some of those perspectives, and we'll then talk about applying those to find many different paths to a sense of purpose. So let's get started. We'll begin with the science of purpose and achievement. And I would say there are really three essentials for a purposeful life. The first is grit, and that has to do with goal pursuit and goal achievement. The second one is strengths. And then the third is impact, which ties to values. So we'll say maybe impact and values together. So let's start with grit. Now, this is a psychological concept that comes from Angela Duckworth. Several other researchers talk about it and study, but she is one of the pioneers in this. And the definition is really holding the same top level goal for a very long time. So a top level goal being like your ultimate concern or a compass that gives direction and meaning to your life and to the goals below it. So, thinking about this would be like if I'm saying, I want to be in the major leagues for baseball. I may have goals that are related to weight training, to my 40-yard dash time, to the amount of hours I spend practicing, to I want to read this book, or I want to make this travel team, or I want to go to this college, right? All of those are kind of sub-goals that cascade into that umbrella goal. And you can also have a bigger umbrella goal. Maybe your big goal is to make $1 million and be a millionaire. First of all, $1 million ain't what it used to be. Second of all, I would encourage you to think about why you want to do that, be that millionaire, and how you want to get there, because that's not a very nuanced approach, but whatever. There's many things you could do. Say, I want to start my first business. I want to sell my first business. I want to learn how to code. I want to get my real estate license, whatever. All of those things kind of feed up to that ultimate goal. And this is an important one because what the research has found, it's kind of consensus science now, is that this quality of grit, right? This perseverance and consistency and focus on a big top level goal for a long period of time is essential for the achievement of your goals. So this holds in a variety of contexts. Duckworth has looked at this in military contexts. You think about West Point, the military academy. You can look at that, and one of the things that predicts retention there and then into the special forces and other areas of the military is this kind of sense of grit in elementary school, middle school, high school. When you're thinking about academic performance and achievement of goals, grit is essential. And then even in like traditional business and sales, etc., grit is absolutely essential. So I'd say that's the first ingredient here, in terms of like designing for a sense of purpose in our lives, is that if we have an idea of what we really want, we need to show a consistency and long-term perseverance towards that thing. And I'm going to share a couple other principles here, but remember, we're going to get very soon into how to start applying these to your life in action. So the second piece that is kind of essential, though, or at the foundation here, comes from Dr. Marty Seligman. Now, he's kind of a pioneer of positive psychology, which is the psychology of human flourishing. If you think about traditional psychology, it's a lot about taking people from kind of down here back to baseline to average. So you're here, you get a little effed up, and you get back to normal. Positive psychology is how do you get people from baseline to like loving it, to really happy. And his definition of purpose or meaning, he says it comes from using your unique strengths to have an impact on something greater than you. I'll say that again. Using your unique strengths to have an impact on something greater than you. So your unique strengths, that means that you have certain attributes or characteristics that you are uniquely good at and tend to be motivated to do. So he calls them signature strengths. The Gallup Research Institute has something called Clifton Strengths that is kind of the same thing. There's the VIA Institute, which is an assessment of character strengths. And then there's another assessment called SIMA, which I think is very helpful, although it's a little expensive, which talks about SIMA as in System for Identifying Motivated Abilities. And motivated ability, of course, being something that you're intrinsically motivated to do and you have a high aptitude to do. So all of those things are pointing to the same thing. It's that you and I and every one of us individuals has certain traits or capacities or skill sets that we tend to be very strong in and that we enjoy doing. And he says that you need to leverage those. And there's actually some interesting research from Gallup. In the 1950s, they looked at speed reading among high school sophomores. And they tried to compare people who kind of naturally had a strength for that versus just everybody else. And they found that those who started out already fast, like 300 words per minute, made way more gains than everybody else. They ended up getting to 2,900 words per minute. So they basically like 5 to 10x'd everyone else. And the idea is that if you leverage your unique strengths, it's not like a 10% better than other people. It's like an exponential difference in the things that you are able to do, and you're going to enjoy them a whole lot more. Now, second part of that, before we get into application, we said is Seligman's definition was using your unique strengths to have an impact on something greater than you. So you need to reach other people or have an impact on the outside world, particularly in a way that's aligned with your values, what's important to you. Now, one study I'll reference here is from Daryl von Tongeren and colleagues that found that people who engage in more altruistic behaviors, like volunteering or donating money, tend to have greater sense of purpose in their lives. Now, I just wanted to offer you one study. I'm not going to get into the details of it because at this point, it's kind of a consensus, I would say, from the psychological sciences that prosocial behavior, actually, interestingly, prosocial spending also, so using your money to benefit other people, has been shown to increase happiness. But more broadly speaking, prosocial behavior, so that's behaviors that is not just good for you, but it's good for the people around you, for the community, for the world, tends to cause a host of beneficial psychological responses. So, feeling more joy, more purpose, more happiness, etc. And so it's important that we're using our strengths to have some sort of impact on the external world. And in a way that's aligned with us, right? So that's where your values come in, is thinking about, well, what are the things that are important to you? Who is important to you? And what is important to you, right? So are there certain groups of people or individual people or communities that matter a lot to you? And then the what, are there certain causes, certain ideas, or certain consequences that are important to you? All right, so in about 30 seconds, we're going to talk about applying all of those together, but let's just review. We said it's essential to have perseverance or grit, right? So sustained focus on a long-term North Star objective. And then you have to identify your unique strengths and use them to have an impact on something greater than you. That is basically what the psychological literature tells us is the kind of the recipe for purpose. Now, how do we apply some of these? So let's talk about finding your strengths and values. So again, for the strengths piece, I'm going to include resources down below to a couple assessments you can do, Clifton strengths or the VIA strengths. But in either case, you're going to help to understand, well, what are the things I'm uniquely good at? Now, you don't have to take an assessment for this necessarily. Here's a couple things you can try applying. Number one is this question from James Clear, which is, what feels like fun to me and like work to others? What feels like fun to me, but like work to other people? So my example, I can think of like reading a paper on psychology and then writing an email newsletter about it, which is like an essay basically. To the average person, that sounds like a horrible way to spend a Saturday morning, but to me, that sounds awesome. So it's like, all right, I can use these strengths as kind of a learner. And then lo and behold, when I took the Clifton strengths assessment, my top two strengths were very much aligned with that. They were learner and input. So learner is what it sounds like. You like to learn. Input is, and this kind of makes sense because I have some family members with diagnosed OCD, and I think I have undiagnosed OCD, is a tendency to want to accumulate and store and organize and manipulate information. So almost being like a mini librarian. So I said, oh, okay, well, that makes sense for the type of work that I want to be doing. I'm going to try to leverage those and creating my own happiness PhD and my knowledge base and all these resources, et cetera, that you find below and that I'm always producing. So that's my strengths. But then how do you, so right, pausing there, you're starting to get some reflection you can do on what am I uniquely good at? What am I intrinsically motivated to do? What am I what comes easily to me that other people struggle with? And then the values piece. So I'll include another resource in the video. These comments are going to be getting pretty long. But your values is basically saying, again, what is important to me? And it could be an idea. It could be a group of people. It could be a cause, but it's really just thinking about what is the type of impact that I want to have in my world for its own sake. If I knew I was never going to make $1 doing it, and I knew I was never going to be recognized for it, what would I want to be doing to serve the world? And when I say serve the world, it doesn't have to be like saving the world, massive, I'm going to cure cancer. It could be like, I really just love preparing a beautiful home-cooked meal and like sharing in that experience with some person. That's totally fine. Whatever it is to you. And when you use that tool, it can help you decipher that. But let's think about now how you can apply this. And I'll use an example here. My friend Mateo, who doesn't know I'm making this video. But I think hearing this will help you think about how you could apply this for yourself. So knowing Mateo, I don't know his official strengths from these assessments, but I know that he's a really good learner and a really good, what I would call like connector or networker. So like bringing two groups of people together or finding a mentor and building a relationship and learning with them and like using that to advance his own kind of growth and his own career. Or just even bigger groups of people like our mastermind group, the 4 of us young entrepreneurs who meet every 2 weeks, like organizing stuff like that, right? So his strengths, learner, networking. Values, well, I know he loves to just grow and make progress on things, so he's kind of an achiever, but just not even necessarily innovation like new technology, but just like, I would say, growth and accomplishing big important things. And then Christianity, for him, that's something that's really important to him is his faith. So it's like, okay, just knowing those as sort of requirements, or as I'll talk about later, guiding parameters, what are some paths to purpose? Well, right off the top, I can think of a few. So remember, learner and networking, connecting groups of people, and then growth and Christianity. He could become the chief human resources officer of a large church. He could become an author and professor on practical Christianity for everyday life. He could become the director of people and culture at Chick-fil-A or some other large company that has values and aligned with the Christian faith. He could do business development strategy for a software that helps churches, or become an entrepreneur and start a big software company that helps churches. If you think about like CRMs, that's a customer relationship manager that nonprofits use a lot of the time. Similar thing for your church, that it tracks your members, your donations, your activities, etc. He could start a podcast on Christian leadership. He could start a peace and reconciliation committee between Christianity and other faiths, because we know across the world right now there's conflicts with sometimes Christians and Muslims, sometimes Christians and Jews, sometimes Jews and Muslims. He could use those networking skills to build think tanks or committees that go in there and kind of heal those communities. So what did I just get there? 6, I think? 6 different, pretty darn different paths that all relate to that same thing. Or, like I said, to go back to the very beginning, he could just get a job working for, corporate strategy for Walmart and making $200,000 a year, and then he only works part-time, and the rest of the time he just volunteers with an organization he loves and writes Christian poetry. I don't know. Like, there's a million things he could do, but what happened is he was clear on those guiding principles or those guiding parameters around, I know what I'm really good at and the type of work that's going to be engaging to me, and I know the type of impact I want to have on the world given my values. So then there's all those different paths. Personal example for me is I know that I basically want to make $100,000, $110,000 per year working a maximum of 30 hours per week as a professional happiness nerd. So that's doing stuff like this and studying. Now, will that mean, right now I have a contract with the Army National Guard, will that mean that I build a 7-figure military training company? Granted, the work I do with them is focused on happiness. I'm not teaching them like how to shoot or something. Will I become a famous YouTuber? Will I go back to Alabama and become a professor? Like, literally all of those could achieve the parameters I want and give me a purposeful life. I just don't know. As I move forward through life, those pathways will become more clear and more available, and I'll be able to decide exactly which one I want to take. But I sort of, again, have these parameters in mind that will help me to make decisions right now to move me towards the end goal that I want to have through the rest of my life. So I'll end with that thought, perhaps. And there's a helpful quote from Steve Jobs. He says, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back." But the idea here is that just you're getting that initial sense of direction from some of these guiding parameters around your strengths, right? What you kind of are really good at and enjoy doing, the impact you want to have and what you value, and then tying that back to some general guiding parameters that become that North Star objective that I talked about earlier with grit, right? That kind of vision or that set of parameters that becomes the long-term thing that you want to work for, and you don't know what the details exactly will be. So there's a really good quote that summarizes this from Hunter S. Thompson. He says, "Beware of looking for goals. Look for a way of life. Decide how you want to live and then see what you can do to make a living within that way of life." So again, you're starting here to just use the principles I've discussed here to get kind of an overarching ideal of what your ideal lifestyle looks like, knowing that the exact details won't come up until much later, but at least you have that direction to guide your decision making, and you start to uncover some of the many paths, right? Because there could be a path that leads to it there, a path over there, a path over there. Just like I used in my example and in the Mateo example, there are many different paths to purpose. So you now have some principles of purpose and hopefully some guiding parameters, and I encourage you at the end of this video to reflect on this for yourself and really get clear on how these fit into your life. So you had some science here to ground you, as well as some what I would call just overall like life strategy. I hope this is helpful. Again, there are a ton of tools down below. This is a video that YouTube suggests and thinks you'll like. And as always, you can come back here for more resources and tools from the Study of Happiness to help you be at your best in work and in life. So this has been your happiness nerd, Jackson Kirchis. Thanks for watching.